In the spring of 1945, an 11-year-old boy named Helmuth overheard his parents discussing a chilling question. Should the whole family die together, or should his father die alone? His father, a Nazi and supporter of Hitler, feared revenge for the crimes Germany had committed. The next day, he took Helmuth for one last walk in the woods, and later, shot himself. For 9 years, Helmuth refused to eat at home, terrified his mother would poison him. Helmuth's story was not unique. By the end of the Second World War, Germany stood disgraced. 6 million Jews, 200,000 gypsies, and thousands of disabled Germans were murdered in a genocidal war. Nazis built killing centers like Auschwitz, where gas chambers became the machinery of death. At Nuremberg, some Nazi leaders were punished, but justice fell far short of the crimes committed. But how did Germany even reach this stage? To understand Nazism, we must begin with the Weimar Republic, born after Germany's defeat in the First World War. In 1919, a democratic constitution was framed at Weimar, granting universal suffrage, even to women. But the republic was weak from birth. The harsh Treaty of Versailles humiliated Germany, stripping away its colonies, territories, and resources. Reparations of £6 billion crippled the economy, and the war guilt clause branded Germany solely responsible for the war. Hyperinflation in 1923 destroyed savings, and the Great Depression of 1929 brought 6 million unemployed onto the streets. Bread cost millions of marks, and despair spread through every family. The young Weimar Republic was mocked as the land of November criminals. With constant economic crises, fragile coalitions, and Article 48 allowing emergency powers, democracy looked helpless. It was in this atmosphere of anger, humiliation, and desperation that Adolf Hitler and Nazism found their chance to rise. Adolf Hitler was born in 1889 in Austria. He grew up in poverty and fought as a soldier in the First World War. The German defeat shattered him, and the Versailles Treaty filled him with rage. In 1919, he joined the German Workers' Party, later renaming it the Nazi Party. What began as a small group would soon rise into one of the most dangerous political movements in history. In the 1920s, Hitler tried to seize power but failed. It was only after the Great Depression of 1929 that the Nazi Party gained mass support. Banks collapsed, businesses shut down, and millions were unemployed. Amid this despair, Hitler's fiery speeches promised jobs, dignity, and revenge against the Versailles humiliation. From just 2.6% votes in 1928, the Nazis surged to 37% in 1932. Becoming the largest party in the Reichstag. Hitler understood the power of spectacle. The red banners with swastikas, the Nazi salute, mass rallies, and ritual applause turned politics into theater. Propaganda projected him as a messiah, the savior who would rebuild Germany's pride. On the 30th of January 1933, President Hindenburg appointed Hitler as Chancellor of Germany. Weeks later, the mysterious Reichstag fire allowed Hitler to suspend civil rights. Communists were the first to be arrested and thrown into concentration camps. With the Enabling Act of March 1933, Parliament was sidelined and Germany became a dictatorship. Political parties, trade unions, and free press vanished overnight. Secret police, the Gestapo and the SS, ruled with terror. Hitler launched massive work programs, building highways and producing the Volkswagen, the people's car. Abroad, he reoccupied the Rhineland, annexed Austria, and dismantled Czechoslovakia. His slogan echoed, "One people, one empire, one leader." For many Germans, it seemed destiny was being reversed. In 1939, Hitler invaded Poland, triggering the Second World War. His armies swept through Europe, forming an axis with Italy and Japan. But in 1941, his invasion of the Soviet Union turned disastrous. At Stalingrad, the Red Army crushed German forces. Meanwhile, Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor brought the USA into the war. By 1945, Allied forces closed in. Hitler's empire collapsed, ending with his suicide in Berlin. And so Hitler's promises of glory led only to ruin, leaving behind stories like young Helmuth's, of fear, betrayal, and the heavy shadow of Nazi crimes. Nazi ideology was built on Hitler's belief in racial hierarchy. At the top stood the so-called pure Aryans, blonde, blue-eyed Germans. At the bottom were the Jews, branded as the anti-race. Others, gypsies, Slavs, blacks, were placed in between, all seen as inferior. Hitler twisted Darwin's theory of natural selection into a brutal idea. Only the strongest race must survive, while the weak should perish. Another pillar of Nazi thought was Lebensraum, or living space. Hitler believed Germany must expand eastwards, seizing land and resources for Aryans. Poland became the testing ground, its people displaced or enslaved to make way for German settlers. Once in power, Nazis set out to build a racial utopia. Only pure and healthy Aryans were deemed desirable. Under the euthanasia program, thousands of mentally and physically disabled Germans were killed. Gypsies, Russians, Poles, and blacks were branded subhuman, starved, or forced into slave labor. But Jews suffered the most. Centuries of prejudice now turned into systematic extermination. From 1933 to 1939, they were excluded, denied citizenship, barred from jobs, and terrorized in the night of broken glass. From 1940, Jews were forced into ghettos like Warsaw and Lodz, marked by hunger, disease, and despair. Finally, from 1941 onwards, the Nazis carried out the final solution: mass annihilation in gas chambers at Auschwitz, Treblinka, and other death camps. Millions perished within minutes. What the Nazis called a racial utopia was in truth genocide on an unimaginable scale. War and murder became inseparable, two sides of the same coin. This was the deadly reality of Hitler's worldview. Hitler believed that the future of Nazi Germany depended on its youth. To build a strong Nazi society, he ensured that children were controlled both inside and outside school. In schools, teachers who were Jews or seen as politically unreliable were dismissed. German and Jewish children could not sit or play together. Textbooks were rewritten with Nazi ideas, even maths lessons carried racist propaganda. Children were taught to hate Jews, glorify war, and worship Hitler. From the age of 10, boys entered youth groups like the Jungvolk. At 14, they joined Hitler Youth, where they learned to glorify violence, war, and absolute loyalty to Hitler. After years of training, at 18, they entered military service. The youth were molded into soldiers for the Nazi state. Girls were taught a very different lesson. Their role was to become good mothers, raise racially pure Aryan children, and preserve Nazi values at home. Mothers who had many children were rewarded with honor crosses. But women who associated with Jews or other undesirable groups were shamed, punished, and even jailed. The Nazi regime used powerful propaganda to shape young minds. Posters, films, slogans, and textbooks spread hatred against Jews, communists, and liberals. Jews were compared to rats or pests, dehumanizing them. The infamous film The Eternal Jew portrayed Jews as enemies of the nation. Through schools, youth organizations, propaganda, and strict control, Hitler shaped an entire generation to believe in Nazism. The young were turned into instruments of his ideology, loyal, unquestioning, and ready to fight. How did ordinary people react to Nazism? Many saw the world through Nazi eyes. They spoke its language, marked Jewish homes, and even reported neighbors. They believed Hitler's rule would bring prosperity. But not everyone was a Nazi. Some resisted bravely, risking death. Yet the majority remained silent, too afraid to protest, too unwilling to differ. Pastor Niemöller, a resistance fighter, captured this chilling silence in his famous words. First they came for the communists, then the social democrats, then the Jews. And when they came for me, there was no one left. For Jews, fear was constant. Charlotte Berat secretly recorded Jewish dreams in her book, The Third Reich of Dreams. Haunted by Nazi propaganda, Jews dreamt of their hooked noses and Jewish looks. They began to internalize the stereotypes, even in their sleep. They died many deaths before the gas chambers. During the war, whispers of Nazi atrocities spread, but the true horrors were revealed only after Germany's defeat. Jews fought to preserve memory, writing diaries, keeping notebooks, creating archives, so the world would never forget. The Nazis, in their last days, burned records to erase their crimes. Today, the Holocaust lives on in memoirs, poems, museums, and memorials. They honor those who resisted, expose those who collaborated, and remind us of the millions who remained silent. The memory stands as a warning, so that humanity never repeats such crimes again. The story of ordinary people in Nazi Germany teaches us one thing: silence in the face of injustice is itself a crime against humanity. In conclusion, I want you all to remember some important dates. They are as follows. August 1st, 1914. First World War begins. August 1st, 1914. First World War begins. November 9th, 1918. Germany capitulates, ending the war. November 9th, 1918. Proclamation of the Weimar Republic. June 28, 1919. Treaty of Versailles. January 30th, 1933. Hitler becomes Chancellor of Germany. September 1st, 1939. Germany invades Poland. Beginning of the Second World War. June 22nd, 1941. Germany invades the USSR. June 23rd, 1941. Mass murder of the Jews begins. December 8th, 1941. The United States joins Second World War. January 27th, 1945. Soviet troops liberate Auschwitz. May 8th, 1945. Allied victory in Europe.